Hey everybody, this is Kyle with Inshore Edge. Today I want to go into a detailed breakdown on the technique called mid-strolling. You've heard me talk about this and even apply it in some of my videos since I've created the Inshore Edge in the past few months. Most recently, my last video actually went in quite a bit more depth. We were fishing for trout and I kind of gave you a decent amount of detail in that, but I realized that there's just so much more I would need to tell you and to kind of help you be able to apply this into your fishing, your everyday fishing, because I believe it should be a part of your arsenal and your everyday fishing, just based off the success I've had. It's been amazing for catching inshore species, trout, reds, flounder, and I'll get into how that has come to be a little bit later. So what is it? What is mid-strolling? In a nutshell, it is taking a soft plastic bait fish imitation lure, and we'll go into those here in a little bit. I got a bunch laid out in front of me, and a jig head. Very familiar, right? I haven't given you anything that's a surprise so far or unfamiliar. If you fish artificials in saltwater inshore, you probably use soft plastic and jig heads. But you're taking this combo and you're fishing it through the water column. Like so, with upper part of the water column, middle, bottom, but a steady level throughout. You can change depths, and we'll get into that, but a steady level. The minnow or the bait is shaking. We call it strolling or shaking or rolling. Real subtle action, kind of hovering above the fish, and ideally above the fish. I can tell you it creates a massive feeding instinct. These fish just destroy it. It has been wildly successful. So let's get into the why. Why do you want to fish this technique combined with other techniques you use, or why do you want to add it, right? So like I said, unlike say your traditional jigging, so say you got a little paddle tail plastic or a straight tail and you're popping it off the bottom, doing well, catching plenty of fish, you'll notice that a lot of your bites, when you pop it up and you let that bait sink, you get bit, right? I believe that is an upward feeding instinct. So that bait came up above the fish, the target species, and they feed up. And that is why mid-strolling is so effective. You can see this in the bass fishing world. YouTube is inundated, social media is inundated with video footage of live scope forward-facing sonar that shows you these fish feeding up as bass fishermen will bring that minnow down within a foot or two of them. These fish will follow it up, and it's just almost like creates a zombie fish where they just lock in and they feed. You're clearly driving on their instincts. And in my short time, even though I don't use forward-facing sonar, I've seen the same thing in the way that these trout and reds and flounder will feed up to eat. So that's the big difference. So instead of hopping and popping and dropping your bait, you're keeping it above that fish at all times. So whatever fish that you traverse over the top of on that retrieve, it is up, it is above them. And so you're always playing on that upward feeding instinct. It is also a slower retrieve, which is very useful in cold water. A lot of success in colder water in our fall, winter, and spring catching fish with this technique. It's also successful in the summer, but when the water's cooler, I've had the best bang for my buck. And like I said, it gets hammered. And not only does it get hammered, it catches bigger fish, especially trout. Catch a lot. Hands down, of all the other techniques, you've seen my boat deck, there's a ton of different lures out there. I throw a lot of different lures. This, by far and away, has got the biggest bites, the best quantity, the biggest quantity of trout, reds, or flounder for that matter. For example, I fished the heavy hitters, Speckled Truth heavy hitters this past year. I think I ended up with 12 trout. 9 of those came on mid-strolling. And so as far as the 3-pound and up trout, the bigger trout for me here in Mississippi. So that's in a nutshell the why. That's if I can impart one thing to you. Everybody likes to catch more fish and bigger fish. This will happen if you give this technique a shot. I encourage you to give it a shot. It only takes 1 or 2 to where it clicks, you see it, and you're like, wow, this is awesome. So let's get into the tackle. All right, so the plastics. There are hundreds of them by every different brand manufacturer you can imagine. You can go on online stores and find a lot of this. You're not going to find a lot of this in local tackle stores inshore. It has not really taken hold. I have very few followers relatively, so maybe the people, I've only got 300-400 followers. That'd be about the extent of people that have seen me use it. There's a few other people that I'll mention a little bit later that have started to use it inshore, much bigger followers, but still relatively a very unheard of technique. But if you go and you YouTube mid-strolling, you could be watching for days bass fishermen use it. So it has been wildly popular and has won almost every major tournament going on the past 5 years. So let's get into it. So I'm going to just loosely give you some categories, right? And so right off the bat, I love to fish 5 inches or better. You can find these down to 3-4 inches, real finesse type baits. I want 5 inches or better. I found that to be very, very successful with trout, reds, and flounder, especially trout or inshore trout. So the winged bait, one of the categories when you start perusing things online, you're going to see winged versions. So what that is a 6.5 inch zoom wing fluke. You see those wings? Any wing version has something like that. And all that does is it catches water and causes a roll, more of a roll action. So that roll, depending on what color pattern you have, will flash. And so it's not just rolling, but it's flashing the sides. That's why I always like to use two-tone natural fish colors. See that little opaque belly looks like the belly of a bait fish. Also, we have the 5-inch zoomed. Same thing, 5-inch, also very effective. I can tell you that the majority of my fish, it came on the 5-inch. My buddy of mine, Chris Bush, that's used it mostly 5-inch. I'm exploring bigger baits, and I'll get to one of them here. I've had some success with 6-inch baits. I think that's just a little bit more for me to do. I think they will be very successful for bigger trout. I'm just trying to unlock that and figure that out, and I'll certainly bring that to you when I do figure it out. We've also got the XPS rocking shad. So another set of wings. You can find these in Bass Pro and Cabela's. Great color pattern, 5-inch bait, rocks and rolls very well. We've got the Yamamoto hinge shad. This is new in the past 5-6 months. It's got a wing that runs from the nose all the way down to this hinge in the back. Also causes great rolling action. You got great colors. This is a 6-inch bait, a little bit bigger. Caught some good fish on this. For me, that's the extent of the winged baits I use. There's plenty others out there. I also like to use a staple is the Rapala Crush City Freeloader. Now, they just recently came out with a 5 and 6-inch version. For the past year and a half, we've used the 4-inch freeloader and I actually stopped using it. And get this, I'll tell you why. So this has been almost too successful in catching numbers of trout. I know, it sounds crazy. But I get bigger bites on 5-inch baits and up, and I just catch too many numbers. You want to fill a cooler? Go with this. This is also very flexible if you want to bounce it on the bottom and fish it like a jig. But mid-strolling this has been very, very awesome. And because of that, I was very anxious for them to come out with their 5 and 6-inch version, which they did just in the past couple months. So that's a 5 1/4. They actually have a 6 1/4 too. I've already caught an almost 4-pound trout just in literally 2 days of fishing this. About all I've fished that larger. So just like I thought, great action, like the smaller version, but bigger profile. And so far it's producing bigger fish. Another company, this one's different, right? So I can explain why I think this is different and why it gets bit so well. This is one of the first ones I started with. This is the Hog Farmer Spunk Shad. Now, this is wildly successful for me in shallow water, 3 feet or less on our flats. They all are good on flats, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But what I think happens, like I said, these fish look up and feed up. This, you can kind of see it has a wider profile in its head and then a real thin tail. If you ever look at a mullet or Popeye mullet, they have a wide head and a narrow tail, and that profile when a fish is looking up probably looks very similar to that. I don't think it's so much the pintail action that probably helps a little bit, but I think it's more so profile. Shallow water, we throw the heck out of that, especially in the spring. Great colors too. But that's an example of thinking outside the box. This was not created for mid-strolling. It was actually for chatterbait trailers, is what they're predominantly used for, and to a lesser extent, like a jerk shad, like a soft plastic jerk bait. But I found it strolls really well. It gets bit. One of our actually, in my opinion, pretty sure this is our first breakthrough for a Inshore tackle brand. So Texas Custom Lures, the Jay Watkins series, he's got some great baits out. They just came out with this little 5-inch bait fish profile. Fantastic colors. I mean, you got 8 or 9 colors. We've been using this just in the past week. I was fishing a similar profile, a similar design the past year, so I knew this was gonna work well. So this has got a neat little design to it. You can maybe see the back, I can angle it for you, is concave. It's got a groove that runs down it. And so what happens is when you are kind of strolling it and shaking it, twitching it, it'll roll, catch the water with that little concave side, and then flip back to the other, back and forth. It rolls probably better than anything I've got here. So really neat bait, tough. My son's caught quite a few trout just in the past 2 trips, still on the same bait. So very tough, which is not the case with a lot of these other baits. They're very, soft baits. It's all about the action. Small sacrifice, in my opinion, to burn through some baits if you're catching bigger fish and lots of fish. Let's see, we're about to crush through. Last but not least, I just started throwing these guys the past month. This is by Jenko Fishing, Jenko. This is called the Dawn. About, I think the past year, they came out with their version. This is a 6-inch bait. They also got great colors. Nothing fancy about this, just your bait fish profile. But it rolls pretty well on its own. All these are accentuated and roll better with the proper jig head. And so with that said, we'll talk about jig heads. So you may be thinking, well, what jig heads do I need? Can I just throw a regular old jig head that I already skip a jig or bounce a jig on the bottom with? You can, all right? So with that said, if you just want to get started, you can use some regular round ball jig heads. This is a VMC hybrid swim bait jig head. You can see there's nothing special compared to what I'm going to show you here in a second. Fantastic jig head all around. Let me show you a great example of a strolling jig head here. So this is the Chompers FFS forward-facing sonar scoping head. It's the Pro. Right off the bat, you'll see that line tie. See that line tie inverted? That is the design a lot of these strolling jig head companies create. When you tie a loop knot on that, caveat, you need to throw these on a loop knot, whether you're using a traditional jig head or these inverted, a loop knot. And especially on these, because if you tie a regular knot on this, that knot will slide and cause it to kind of run wonky. So you want to tie a loop knot, and that loop knot allows it to freely, the head design to actually freely roll much better. You'll see this design is similar to one of the companies you're probably very familiar with Inshore jigs is Death Grip jig heads. They got that kind of, that design, all that lead holder going all the way down, really grips your plastics very well. Some people in the bass world have caught on to that. Works well. But great jig head there, the Chompers. You've got probably my favorite between these two. You got the Owner Range Roller. Owner Range Roller, there's that guy right there. They use the modification. So their line tie is straight 90 degrees. See, it's got some lead molded around, but what you'll notice is the ball is kind of above the hook shank if you look closely. That actually creates a rolling action. By creating the ball, the bulk of that lead above the hook shank causes it to fall and roll much more. Fantastic bait right there. Then you also have the Queen Tackle Rolling Strolling jig head. Look at this guy. You can kind of see, look at that line tie, almost reverse. That will not work without a loop knot. Trust me, I've tried it. That knot will slide sideways if you have a traditional knot, and it'll just run sideways. You put a loop knot on there, this thing rolls like nobody's business. You put this jig head on any plastic you want. You can go with just a regular soft plastic jerk bait. It'll make it roll with a loop knot. So really neat bait there. And last but not least, my other favorite came out about a year ago. This is the Gamakatsu Horizon head. Now, the reason I like this, nothing special, 90 degree line tie, got a little bit of grip there. You see it's got that wider shank hook. That is huge. A lot of these plastics, especially these bigger ones, are bulky, right? And with a normal J-size hook gap, I've lost probably my biggest trout since I've been down here, guesstimated around 7 pounds or so, because I had a traditional jig head buried down in there, and basically during the fight, he managed to get that plastic wedged into the gap and pried that hook out. Said never again. So I use wide gap hooks. And if I don't have a wide gap hook, one way to make your baits roll even better is you take that hook, and instead of, I'm not going to actually thread this, but traditionally you thread it right down the middle of the plastic, and then it comes out like so. To make these roll a little bit better and to expose more hook, run your hook down just the back so you're within the plastic, but like kind of higher on the bait, so closer to the top. And what'll happen is essentially you'll expose more hook out the top, and you'll have more lead up above the bait, which will cause it to roll more. Neat little technique there. All right, so that's in a nutshell, that is all my jig heads. I'll post all these at the bottom of my YouTube, and I'll put them on comments on Facebook also, so you can kind of have these. These are absolutely not the end all be all. They're what I've discovered. I can promise you every one of these catch fish. They all get bit. They get bit pretty much consistently, and they all do different things. So sometimes you'll notice the wing baits get bit more than the others, so you just kind of tinker around with it. All right, so let's get into the wear. All right, so flats. And this is what I've learned about inshore fishing. Can you catch fish deep like this? Yes, absolutely. I'm struggling with it, and I'll explain why. But let's get back to the flats. So, like I said, this bait is a bait that you are bringing above fish. You are triggering that upward feeding instinct. And like I said, you'll see shortly, if you give it a shot, that is a massive feeding response. It is playing on a kind of primal internal instinct that these fish have in their little brains. So naturally, if I'm on a flat in 3 feet of water, no matter what I do, whether I bring that just under the surface or a foot lower, I'm fairly close to that fish, assuming worst case that fish is sitting on the bottom. So just by bringing this bait closer, you're going to play on that instinct much more. How do I know this? Because you can watch in the bass fishing world, fishing deeper using live scope and forward-facing sonar, they usually have to get that bait right down to the fish. On occasion, when they're aggressive, they'll come up pretty far. But most of the time, they're bringing it down, and then they play that fish up, and that fish will eat it. Why have I struggled in the depth? Well, one, I don't use forward-facing sonar or live scope, so I can't see what my lure is doing. Talking to some of my bass fishing buddies, and I also realize as I'm fishing this, if you're fishing in clear water, if you got a swimming pool, use it, you can see it. You'll notice that the nature of jigging this with the rod tip up, it tends to climb in the water column. And so you have to let it sink or go slow to kind of keep it even level, but it tends to climb. And so if you're fishing 10 feet, you see maybe, the regular traditional sonar, fish are on the bottom, you're fishing 10 feet, you want to get it down to that 9-8 feet range in front of those trout or the reds or whatever. Most of the time, you're probably not down there. You may think you're down there, but quickly you get up 3-4 feet, and unless those fish are super aggressive, they're not going to come up and eat it. Like I said, whereas on the flats, you're almost always a foot or two above those fish. And the difference is massive with our inshore species. And so I try to target fish shallow with these. I'm still working and learning with the deeper stuff. I am getting better with it. I find out that you have to impart a lot more sinking to keep your bait at depth. But that's tougher, right? So a lot of potential there, learning, but the shorter learning curve is flats fishing. So find your trout on the flats. All right, so, and then on that note, I mentioned earlier a buddy of mine, Chris Bush, who has been a huge part creating the Speckled Truth. He also has on his Instagram account, the guide, like a fishing guide post, like a fence post, the guide post. I want to throw him a bone there. He's got an outstanding little deal where he's does a lot of teaching and just education on big trout in Texas. He's really gravitated towards that. This guy grew up in Louisiana, can catch the heck out of any inshore species you can think of, grew up with it, just a wealth of information. And so we've been trying to get him to throw these mid-strolling baits for a while. And he's like, you know what, Kyle, let's do it. I'm going to go down there, tell me what I need to get, what he can get the last second. He went down there. And I remember that day I was at work, and within an hour, he sends me a picture of a massive trout. And I'm like, I knew it. I was so excited. I knew he was going to destroy with it. And sure enough, but on flats, they fish flats down there. And so same thing. I was in no way surprised that just based off my short experience with them, that they were going to smoke big trout. And he's had some buddies down there start throwing it too, and they've had wild success with it too. It doesn't work all the time, right? There are, like any lure, there's going to be times where they're just not feeding. But I'll say this, it works so often. I always have this tied on, and I will always try it if I'm on trout, especially if I'm around big trout. I make sure I work this in at some point. It's a disservice not to, because it's that successful. All right, so that that's a rundown. I know a little wordy, a little long-winded, but there's a lot to it. I'm going to be learning more with this as years go by. That's kind of like what I alluded to. I'm going to be using this for probably ever. This is just such an effective technique to have as part of your fishing arsenal. And I will certainly share that with you. There's going to be lots of video as I get into fish here in the years to come on this platform using this technique. And I'll teach whatever I learn. I promise to impart that on you and teach you as I go. But please give it a shot. Set up for it, have it on the deck, have it in the boat, and next time you're on a mess of trout or reds, throw it in there, get bit, it'll click, I promise you. You'll see how you get bit, and you will be like, wow, this is awesome. Definitely gonna throw this. All right, y'all. Please ask questions in the comment section on either platform, Facebook, YouTube. I will definitely answer those as quick as possible. And again, I appreciate y'all following me. Spread the word, like and follow, tell people about it. I'm like as you know, I'm trying to do an educational platform here, not watch me fish. Even though I understand that we do got to put some fishing shots in there, and it's entertaining. Hey, we all love to watch people catch fish, but the primary focus is to educate and teach you everything I've learned, and as I'm learning and discovering inshore species. So spread the word. The more the merrier that I can impart the knowledge on as I learn it. So appreciate you following. This has been Kyle with Inshore Edge, and we'll see y'all next time.